Hello, everybody, and welcome to IWF Reads Author Chat with Alice Marie Johnson. This is Patrice. I am a senior policy analyst here at IWF, and we are excited to have our special guest, Miss Alice Marie Johnson. She is an amazing woman, and I'm just throwing that out there. But she has also just written a book called Afterlife, My Journey from Incarceration to Freedom. Now, Ms. Johnson, she has many fans here at the Independent Women's Forum. We are an organization that believes in freedom and opportunity for women and for all Americans. And so we are going to get into her life, her platform as an advocate, and so much more. But before I get into it, I do have some quick housekeeping things to get through. So bear with me very quickly. If you're new to IWF Reads events, I wanted to give you a few pointers for just how to engage and interact with us today. Number one, we have a chat room on the side of your screen. If you don't see the chat room, you can select the caret at the top right corner of your chat window and join the discussion. We want to hear from you. So we'll be keeping an eye out for your comments. Number two, when Alice Marie joins us in a few moments to talk, we want to make sure that we hear from you. So the next tab next to the chat room is also questions. If you have a question for her that you want asked, please post it in the questions tab. We are looking out for it, and we will see your questions. And this is the best place to place any questions that you may have. And then number three, towards our end of the time with Miss Alice during today's discussion, we are going to be drawing a special drawing of her book, and we're going to announce two people, that's two, to receive a copy of Afterlife as a door prize for attending today. So in order to win, you must be present during the drawing. I'm going to read those names live, so you've got to be here and stay till the very end. All right. So we are so thrilled to have Miss Alice Marie Johnson today. You know what? She is a cultural icon. She is a figure of redemption. She is the face of the First Step Act in criminal and historic bipartisan criminal justice reform. Maybe you've seen her on Keeping Up with the Kardashians or the Today Show. Maybe you watched that viral mic video of her. Perhaps you saw her at the White House. I met her there myself earlier this year. Or you saw her speak during the Republican National Convention. But she's more than that. She is a grandmother. She is a woman of faith, strong woman of faith. And she has an optimism that has lit her path through some dark moments. And so her memoir, I held that up earlier, Afterlife, My Journey from Incarceration to Freedom. It had me on the edge of my seats, and I know it will have you on the edge of your seats too, as she takes you along her journey from where her family started to ending up in the White House. So I'm gonna, and everyone please join me in welcoming her to the stage. Alice, thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you so much, Patrice, for having me here. I'm very excited to be a part of this event today.
Wonderful. Well, we are so appreciative of your time. We're just going to get right into it. And I want to start by letting you talk about yourself. And I'm going to ask you, how do you define yourself? Who is Alice Marie Johnson?
Well, the way that I would define myself is, some people call me a warrior, but I call myself a relentless, unstoppable woman who is on a mission. And I know that my mission is truly God ordained, because it is about his people. And I'm a servant to the people, even in prison, even as a leader. I led as a servant leader. I'm a mother, a grandmother, and a great grandmother. I have 4 children, remaining children. I have 7 grandchildren and 3 great grandchildren. So I'm an advocate. I consider myself as a voice for the voices that have been silenced because they're in prison, and also an advocate for the returning citizens who need help to get their freedom legs. And I guess I'm not trying to boast about myself. I am very humble by the path and the journey that God has me on, because I know that it is truly his hand that is in operation in my life.
That's beautiful. And as we were talking in the green room just before this, your story sounds so much like Joseph in the Bible. For those who may not be familiar, he's a biblical character, and he was a son who had a lot of favor on his life, although he had some jealous siblings. But his life took many tragic turns, and despite that, he saw himself rise to incredible leadership. And so, I think I'd love to start with your beginning. People would be surprised where your family came from and where you ended up. Can you talk a little bit about your home life, your parents, where that fighting spirit came from?
I am a daughter of Jim Crow, Mississippi. I was born to parents who were sharecroppers. My mother had a particular skill, and that was the skill to cook. She was a woman who many called a woman ahead of her times. So I literally grew up. I literally grew up in Mississippi in the cotton fields. And when I was 5, I'm number 5 girl and number 6 in the lineup of my family. So I consider myself a middle child, having 9 siblings. I grew up in a family that we were strong. I had a strong foundation of faith. We were Christians. I still am a Christian woman. And I learned to persevere through the hard times, through the things that we went through in Mississippi. I learned to sing in doing hard times, because when we'd be in those cotton fields and it got really hard and those cotton bolls were cutting our hands, we start singing old, as you call them, Negro spirituals. And somehow that just made it easier, because it's hard to complain and sing at the same time. And that was something that carried me very far when I found myself in prison. I grew up with a desire, with a strong desire to really be a success in life. My family, my parents, the way that they escaped the sharecropping, because we lived on someone else's place, as they called it back in Mississippi. And having that many children, it was really a big bonus for the landowner, because we had good unpaid, low paid workers there to work his fields for him. And my father also worked in the barn milking the cows. And so we literally, when we got out of that life, it looked like a scene from Roots, because every single year, my father had this dream of what we look at as a promised land, of going up north. One day, moving so many people in Chicago and Indiana and other places, literally came from sharecroppers from Mississippi. A lot of relatives that still in Chicago. But we looked as going up north as going to the promised land. And every year we'd have these crops come in, and every year we'd be told by the landowner that we didn't have any money left over, because we'd have to get things on credit. But when we escaped from that, was the straw that broke the camel's back, was we had one of the best years. And when it was time to tally up and get the leftover money, because this year was going to be the year that we left Mississippi, we were told that there was no money left. And my mother, being a very resourceful woman, back then you could not argue, because remember, this is time of Jim Crow. And my mother started selling plates out of the trunk of the car at places where our landowner would not be able to discover that she was doing something to make extra money. And they bought property 10 miles up the road in a town called Olive Branch, Mississippi. And literally, we had to escape. They bought one of these Jim Walter homes. And at night, after working in the fields and working in the barns, my mother and father would go there, hanging sheetrock, doing things, preparing it for us children to get away from there without the landowner finding out. So when they had everything together, enough money squirreled away from my mother's extracurricular thing she was doing to make money. Under the cloak of darkness, our car was pushed down the road, and me being the big talker, they had to put their hands over my mouth so I wouldn't give up noise. Uh, but we escaped, and that sounds awful that we had to escape in this day and time, but that was 60 years ago, and we literally had to escape into a better life. And my parents vowed that they would never find themselves or wanted their children to be in that position. So education became critical in our household. My sisters and my one brother, all college educated. But for me, going into the 670s, I wanted to live life. I wanted to experience something different. And plus, I saw something in the church because I had this love of Jesus. Um, they find me so many times laying in the fields talking to Jesus because I had this drawing to him. And but I saw something that turned me off at with the church. And we know that sometimes when you strike out on your own, that's a very unsafe place to be out there separated from everything else. And at 14, I walked away from the church. At 15, I found myself pregnant, and I got to get married because you don't get pregnant and walk around with a big belly in school. They didn't have teenage things to help young mothers to stay in school. In fact, I didn't even know, Patrice, that I was getting married, and I'm not going to tell every detail of the book.
Yeah, save some for the readers to buy a copy.
They have to read the story. But anyway, I became a pregnant young mother,
Yeah.
but still, I did not allow that to stop me because I kept on with my education, and I graduated from high school. Even though I had a second child, I'm married, have a second child. I graduate on time, but even that was a fight that the readers have to read about what it took to accomplish that. And every job that I have, I literally in Mississippi, in our town, I made history there because I was the first Black person to work in an office. I
Wow.
desegregated offices in our town because I had such good typing skills. And every job after that, no matter what I'd start at, I'd always rise to another level because my parents really instilled in us what I called a spirit of excellence. To no matter who is looking, do the best work that you can. Don't work because people have their eyes on you, but work and have integrity. Because your character, your good name, as my mother used to say, is the most important thing that you can have is a good name. And after 19 years, I left my husband. We had a very turbulent marriage. Young teenage marriages, oftentimes just don't last. We grew apart from each other, and plus, he was a big cheater. And I left my husband. I moved to Memphis, and I left him pregnant, and I ended up on welfare and all of the other things. But I never wanted my children to see or think that that was the way to go, was to receive welfare. When I took my children to those offices and I saw what was generations of people, I saw a young mother, her mother, and her grandmother, and they were all there in that welfare line. And I walked away from that. I said, I will not let my children think, because we had 5 children together. I'm pregnant with the last one. I don't want my children to see or think that this is a way of life. And after my son was born, after he was 9 months old, I decided I didn't have a car. I'm alone in Memphis by myself. And I got a job with the Urban League, Memphis Urban League. And as the Lord says, your gift will make room for you. And it was through writing a poem about someone who had died suddenly that the vice president of FedEx, who was on the board, saw my writing, because I've always used writing as a way to express my feelings, a way to escape The marriage that I was in, I'd write poems, I'd write songs, I'd put it all on paper. I was lived very lonely. It was just me and my children. I didn't really do many things. I didn't have an opportunity to really live life. And that led to, when he saw it, I went to work for FedEx. He asked me if I wanted to work for FedEx because of that poem. And he just so happened to be the mentor of the young man who was killed tragically in the accident. And my career with FedEx spanned 10 years. I rapidly moved up through the ranks. I moved into management pretty quickly,
Mm-hmm.
a management position in computer operations, but it was my work, my work ethics and my ability to motivate people,
Mm-hmm.
to lead the work groups. They weren't looking for someone that was so technical because they had other managers in this department who were technical. They needed a people person, and I was that person. And I moved from that to training people for management and even receiving awards at FedEx as for starting up the first quality action teams. I was almost what you call a workaholic. I didn't have a social life. Me and my husband went back and forth. He came, found us, and we got together for a while. But after 19 years of marriage, my marriage totally crumbled. And I'm here, 30 something years old, never having dated, and seeing life before me. And it is looking so exciting. I want to live. I meet someone who is a gambler. I started gambling myself, and I didn't know about gambling addictions, that I developed a gambling addiction.
Yeah.
And that is what has cost me my job because I loaned money from an expense because I didn't use all the money. And
Yeah.
we're gambling, we're having a good time. And that led to um, that led to me losing a very good career, and a very good job. And when that happened, I went into a straight up panic, didn't know what to do. My house is about to be foreclosed on. I had to file bankruptcy. And in the midst of all of these other things that are going on, I lose a son in a tragic accident, scooter accident, my youngest, my baby son. But an offer had came to me to to help me out of my troubles. And it was, I look back at it, it literally was an offer from hell. They told me that it would be simple. It would be my telephone. I wouldn't be selling no drugs. In fact, they didn't even really talk about drugs too much. They talked about me being the person who was not in the streets.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I would be the connector. I would be the safe person. And I found later on from just talking to other people when I went to prison, that role is called the telephone mule. You
Mm-hmm.
are the person that connects one person to the other. They don't know you, you don't know them. I didn't sell the drugs, I didn't make the drug deals. I connected the phone numbers without them knowing who I'm connecting. They say, call this number. I'm here. Call them and tell them to call this number. So they had my phone number. And when everything fell apart, there's very people who, some of them who brought me into this and they got busted. Now all of a sudden I'm their boss. Never even touched drugs before, but I become their boss. We
Mm-hmm.
go to trial. The trial lasted 6 weeks, and I'm not going to go into all the details, but you
Yep.
have to read about that kangaroo trial. I was offered 3 to 5 years, and I went to trial because my attorney told me they have nothing on you, but I didn't know about conspiracy laws. I went to trial. I was found guilty by an 11-person jury of attempted possession. I went from being offered 3 to 5 years to sentenced to life plus 25 years without the possibility of parole.
Well, Alice, let me pick up with you on that because I think, folks, you need to go back and read this. I mean, Alice, you do a great job of getting us to that point. And, I'm not going to, I want folks to go and hear your story about now the transition from being free to being imprisoned. And even in the midst of that, your excellence shined through. You did amazing things to build the community of those people who you are serving with, the women in prison, mentoring, setting up activities, building people's spirit. And I'm curious, once there were so many times, so many changes that occurred from a legal perspective and a criminal justice perspective, where you probably wouldn't have gotten a life sentence.
For sure.
For sure today, especially. When you, it's such a huge issue, but when you think about your time while serving, a lot of the time you spent was about helping women and
Yes.
ensuring there's dignity for women. And part of the criminal justice conversation I just wanted to tap today, because I know our time is fleeting, but is about dignity.
Yes.
And how do you preserve dignity while you're serving? From a reform standpoint, what could be done to ensure that, hey, we understand that someone is serving time for a crime that they committed, and maybe there's appeals and et cetera, but what can we be doing and thinking about when it comes to dignity for women behind bars?
There have been some inroads made to dignity for women. You'd be surprised at the simplest of things. Women are oftentimes compared to men who are incarcerated. Even the supplies that they gave us were based upon, if a man needs 2 rolls of toilet paper, a woman must need only 2 rolls because you're both inmates. And we know that women have different needs, and women who couldn't even afford sanitary products. If you didn't have family to help take care of you, you became almost a beggar just for the simplest of things. And so with the First Step Act that was passed, that part of dignity was put in. I was in prison with women who gave birth, who were shackled to their beds doing childbirth, and were only unshackled when they knew, when the doctors felt that they were getting ready to do the last push. And many times they weren't unshackled in time to get the last push in.
Wow.
And under the First Step Act that has been abolished, my first prison, I was sent as additional punishment 1,500 miles away from my children. And that has changed where you can't be over 500 miles away from your family. And it's not that there were places, sometimes they use it as extra punishment to make sure that you are separated and sent as far away. One thing that I hope will change, there were so many women who were in prison. Women are the fastest growing population of new prisoners. 800% increase in the last 10 years of incarcerated women. This is a huge problem. And not that I'm saying anything about the men, but most of the time when a mother goes to prison, the family structure falls apart because if there's a man who got, many of the women were single households, heading up single households, and their children are just caught up in the system themselves. My youngest son was caught up in that system. He fell through, and he ended up being my pen pal. My son, who had dreams of going to college without any parental guidance, he just fell through. And I'm glad that there are groups out there now that are looking at the needs of the children of the incarcerated. But women don't deserve to, if you have not been a bad mother, if you don't have anything that the court has ordered you to be separated from your children, I've sat and comforted many women who, someone who becomes the caregiver of their children makes a decision that I'm going to cut off all contact between this mother and her child. The child is the one who suffers along with the mother because they don't understand, they feel abandoned. So something that has to change where you legally cannot cut off communications between a mother and their child because you're hurting, and just relatives, sometimes friends. And we just have to look more too at women's needs. The telephone, for us, the telephone system, system wide, became where we only receive 300 minutes a month to communicate with our families. That's 20 15-minute calls because you have 15 minutes at one time. How do you separate that? it becomes terrible. If anything happens at home, you're just cut off from everything. I just don't think it should be a limit where you are regulating communication with a woman and her children, with a mother and her children. That goes down to just the whole dignity of trying to remain a mother. We
Yeah.
it's a very difficult thing, and that's why I cannot stop. And you've probably seen me fighting and talking about this issue
Mm-hmm.
because I can never forget the women who I left behind. In my book, you'll see the bonds. In prison, women don't have gangs. You
Mm-hmm.
don't find women, there's a gang here. Women are nurturers. We're more relational. And
Mm-hmm.
we have in prison what we call our prison families. And so we develop families. And it's not like a gang family, it's so you can have that structure and you can still feel somehow that you're still human, that you still have family, because family is still, that's innate in us. That is very much innate in us. So women develop families in prison. I have so many daughters now. You look at
Mm-hmm.
my Facebook, you'll see so many people calling me mama.
Well, we started this conversation about family, and I think it's a really good place to wrap it up about family. There is so much in this book that I want people to go out and purchase your story. To understand what goes on behind bars. We talked a little bit about, dignity for women behind bars. I think another aspect is just legal representation. Your
Yes.
story with your with Wayne, your previous lawyer. There's so much about the judges, the prosecutors, your legal representation. All of those go into, unfortunately, why I think so many people see America as over-criminalized and too many people serving sentences that don't make sense for the crime that they committed. So Alice, I'm going to give you a minute in just a moment just to share your final thoughts with our audience. And maybe you want to share what that was like hugging your grandchildren for the first time, whatever you'd like to say. But for those who are joining us today for IWF Reads, we have run out of time listening to this awesome woman, Miss Alice Marie Johnson, talk about her story of redemption. And you've got to get the book. I've waved it plenty of times. Please go back and make sure that you get that book. We are announcing the names of the two people who won this book, and I'm going to name them right now: Kathy Kellogg and Latasha Drax. Kathy Kellogg, I think Tax, I guess, and Latasha Drax. So you will be getting a signed copy of this book, which is fantastic. I just want to take a moment to say at the Independent Women's Forum, we love talking about freedom and opportunity, and that's a story that's for women and men who are incarcerated, because you need freedom and you need opportunity. After you serve your time, the way we ensure people don't fall back into the system is to make sure there is opportunity. And thank goodness we've seen efforts through the First Step Act to help people, gain the skills while serving, as well as gain opportunity when they come out. So thank you for coming today and enjoying us for this IWF Reads Author Chat. Please send us a note at info@IWF we'd love to hear more from you. Please go ahead, join our Facebook group so you can know IWF Reads Book Club when we're going to have the next ones. And Alice, I'm just going to sign off by saying, please just share a minute of yourself and what you'd like to say to the audience before we say goodbye.
I'd like to say to the audience, this book is not a book just about prison. It is a book about hope in a dark time. And right now in this nation, we are going through dark times. And I was able to hold on to my hope in the darkest of times. And sometimes you can't see a way out, but it's hope that will take you through it. And it's my desire that my book will inspire, encourage, it will make you laugh, it will make you cry, it will make you celebrate victory, because this really is a story that is our story as survivors. Many women, many men will relate to my story because it is not a story that is dedicated to prison. It's a journey. And what one person can do by saying that I'm not going to look at how big the problem is. I'm going to look at my ability and what I can do to chip away and make life better for those, not only for myself, but for those who are around me. So thank you so much again for having me here today. Uh, I wish I had talked a little bit more, had a little bit more time to tell you about my post journey and the journey in prison. But I want you to know this book is going to turn into a movie. Scott Butnick, who did Just Mercy, has bought
Wow.
the movie rights. So it will be a movie, and you will get a jump on the movie, and you'll see things, you'll read things that you may not see in the movie.
Well, can we have you back to show the trailer and talk through the movie when it's ready?
Of course, I love that.
Thank you, Miss Alice. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Again, please go get your hands on a copy of Afterlife. Find it wherever books are sold. Visit IWF.org to learn more about our organization. We have legal minds, we have economic scholars, we have people who care about freedom and opportunity for women and for everyone in this nation. So thank you. I just want to say thank you, Miss Alice, for joining us today to share your story, and we will see you all at IWF Reads next time. Thank you.
Thank you.